spaces in between because the roots of the corn aren't there and they're not really competing too much with the weeds. All right, so here's a method that I came up with for planting or for creating corn hills, and it creates a natural hill very quickly. If I walk in a straight line, all I get is a furrow, but if I walk in a spiral, I'll come up with a corn hill. And I'll start right in the middle, right here, and walk around in a curve. And go outward and outward as I walk around. And there we are. There is a corn hill quite naturally, with no more work than any other method with a small stone hoe like this. And now the soil is loosened up. I'll get rid of a few of the weeds, but as long as they rot, they'll provide nutrients. So I'll leave some of the dead weeds in there. That looks pretty good. That took less than a minute to create one corn hill, and it wasn't very hard work. And if I want to neaten it up with my rake, I can do that too. It just happens to be the right shape. And the soil is nice and loose and actually ready to receive my seeds. There's a stubborn one. Good. All right. We talked about preparing a Native American garden using a stone hoe and other primitive implements. Occasionally they used fire, and one year there was an accidental burn-off behind the wigwam. Luckily the wigwam didn't burn down, and the fire was so intense that it degraded all the turf and all the other wild plants in it, and it made the soil very easy to hoe up and plant hills. And as you can see here, I prepared 45 hills in all in less time than I would have if the fire hadn't degraded the turf. It was much easier work. And the other plus side is that the nutrients from the turf were burnt down to essential elements, and the rain drove them into the hill. So we not only have easy preparation, but extra nutrients by using fire. And that's how a new garden was often started, with fire. Very nice corn hill. So it's almost not a hill, it's just the soil from the edges mounded up a little, quite naturally by the process of hoeing. And let's plant now. I always plant the corn first. I usually plant 5. That seems like a very native number, doesn't it? 5. There's 5s all around. And I often put 1 corn seed in each hole. Sometimes 2. All right, pack them in there. And before I do that, I'll plant the beans, and I usually plant 3 bean plants, 3 or 4 in between the corn. Let's do 4 here. It's really very easy work. Now, you would need a lot of these, of course, to feed your family through the rest of the summer and into the coming winter, but that would be done. All right, there we are. Pack those right in there. And I'd like to put my pole back just in case the beans come ahead of first before they have the corn to climb. Nothing to it. All right, that's good. And then we'll put the squashes over in the corners, and I usually plant 2 squash plants. There's a squash seed there. And I like to mark the location of the squashes so I'm sure what's coming up. Nothing to that. There's a lot of debris in the garden from last year, and it's all quite useful. So I'll expect a squash plant to come up right there, and another one right over here, and that should be enough. And squash seed there. Get the right kind of seed. All right. And really, that is all there is to planting. I've got to do this multiple times, of course. This is a small garden. Native people would have had larger gardens than this, of course, okay? Now, there's one detail that I really should mention. Getting a little warm out here, and I've been working more than I typically would in the springtime because I wouldn't be planting this garden. That's better. My wife would be planting this garden. It was the women who did the farming. Now, this may sound a bit strange, and when white people first came here, they considered that the Indian men were just lazy and were using the women as slaves in the garden. And we don't believe that anymore. If you think about it, the idea of fertility, bringing life into the world, and nurturing is definitely a women's thing. And in a sense, we suspect that they told the guys to keep out of the garden because they mess up the whole sequence. And planting was kind of a sacred thing, and that had to be respected as a woman's privilege. And so the squaws did most of the work in the garden. The men would help out with woodwork, getting poles, things like that, maybe doing some of the weeding, but the women did most of it. They were the backbone of the Native American economy. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing what we did here and some of the knowledge that I've been able to gain by experimenting like this. And perhaps we'll get a chance to see the products of our garden sometime later this year.